to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. I'm Dr. Greer, and I'm the founder of the Disclosure Project and the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And also we are doing a film known as Sirius. You can find out more about that at SiriusDisclosure.com. That's S-I-R-I-U-S disclosure.com. And I'd like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network for hosting us here every 2 weeks to give you an update on our work and the exciting projects that we're involved with, dealing with new energy, anti-gravity systems, ET contact, and now, of course, this full-length feature documentary film that is set for release this spring. So I'm really excited about our guest today. Is Chris Crescitelli. He is a wonderful man who I met 2 years ago at Sundance Film Festival, and he is someone who's done a lot of work in Hollywood with films and hosting special events and putting together the well-known 3D Film Festival that's in Los Angeles. And in fact, it's Chris who introduced me to actor Thomas Jane, who is now doing the voiceover for our film Sirius. So Chris has done a great job networking for us and helping us with this project, and is sort of one of the co-producers for the film Sirius, and is also going to help pull together the premiere that we're going to be holding in Los Angeles, the main big premiere for Hollywood. And so I'm excited about having him on the call today and on the show, and to kind of introduce him to the audience, and so that he can talk about how he got involved with all of this. So welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, so why don't you tell folks a little bit about how you got interested in the whole subject, having been doing work in Hollywood for a couple of decades, and how we sort of met a couple of years ago.
Sure. Well, like most creative people in Hollywood, when you find a project that interests you or a subject matter, you tend to do a little bit of research. And as it turns out, I was working on a screenplay that was intended to be a movie about sort of a peaceful alien encounter. And in my research, I was fortunate enough to stumble upon the Disclosure Project and all the work that you've been doing, Dr. Greer. Some of the eye-opening instances probably that hit on the Richter scale for me, some of the work and discussions that you had with Paul Hellyer. I believe he's a big conduit to reach people like myself in Hollywood and other places. So having the impetus to set up a program in Sundance was a really great idea, and thanks to you, we pulled off the first sort of mainstream corporate marketed UFO event. And I was wondering how you felt about that program, having a different audience than the typical convention and UFO enthusiasts. There you were talking to a lot of filmmakers and journalists and people who were there for the normal corporate mainstream marketing, and they got a dose of this very explosive, very interesting information.
Yeah, well, it was fun. I mean, both this past year and 2 years ago, because so many of the people who are in Hollywood, and I met a number of well-known actors and producers and whatnot, and they know the subject only through the garbage that, no offense to you, Chris, of course, that Hollywood puts out on the subject, which is 99% xenophobic, nasty, scary stuff. And when I started talking to people and started talking about the extent to which Disclosure Project has, over 500 top-secret military witnesses and whistleblowers, and that we've been doing briefings for, the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency and the CIA director, members of Congress for almost 20 years, people were a little bit astonished. I mean, I think for most people that the subject is so much pigeonholed into the realm of the fantastic and the fantasy and the science fiction genre that they didn't really understand that underneath all of that, or behind sort of it hiding, is a true story. And the true story is actually much more fascinating than any of the science fiction that's been created. And it was interesting sort of having that conversation with people in Hollywood, because, it's the land of fantasy. And when you start talking about the reality of the subject, and then you sort of bridge over to, why it's been held secret. I know we were having a conference call yesterday with our film team that's been involved with a marketing group there in Hollywood that has done a lot of the big films and worked on An Inconvenient Truth and The Hobbit and Django Unchained and all these other films. And one of the things that the person couldn't understand, apparently, was the connection between the ET subject and this whole environmental and energy issue. And it was kind of comical because on the call yesterday, and I know, Chris, you couldn't be on it, but I said, look, it's really simple. All you have to do is ask the question, here's a photograph of the craft. Here is a body we're working on that is quite obviously of extraterrestrial origin, but we're still investigating it. And here's all these whistleblowers who have been involved with these projects up to and including retrieving downed ET vehicles that we've shot down and autopsying bodies and studying the propulsion and energy systems behind it. With all that evidence that we have and the thousands of pages of top-secret documents and the hundreds and hundreds of hours of top-secret testimony that we have on videotape, someone needs to ask the question, how are they getting from there to here? And when you ask that question, that's the solution to the environmental and energy problem, but that's also the reason for the secrecy. So I said it's very easy from a marketing point of view, because this is a person who is a marketer. And I said what you have to do is say, these are real, how are they getting here? The answer, boom. It's a new world, new energy, new civilization, no more oil, no more mountaintop removal of coal, no more gas, coal, nuclear power, no more Fukushimas. I mean, this is really the truth behind the secrecy, because it's, a Goldman Sachs guy said, you're talking about a $600 trillion piggy bank that people own in all these commodities and minerals and stuff that's destroying our planet, but it's the basis for a huge amount of wealth in the world. And I said, yeah, well, they're just going to have to get over it, because we need a new world.
Yeah, that is the call to action. In fact, in addition to all the wonderful things I learned about science and all of the forward movements in free energy, it was really that save the planet sort of mantra that captured my attention and was my call to action. If there was a way to bring these technologies to light so that they could decrease the carbon emissions, hello, that's number one priority.
Right.
You know what I mean? So,
right.
So that, coming from just a person in Hollywood going out to make a movie investigating this subject, that was really the thing that captured my attention and where I find my inner passion in doing the work with you and Arm and everyone else.
Right, and I think the other part of it that I mention to people frequently is that the other big part of what we're doing is an interplanetary ambassadors program. And, of course, we just got back from Marco Island, Florida a couple of days ago. In fact, I just got back here to Virginia 2 nights ago. And it was an amazing series of contact events that happened there that I'll get into in a little bit. But we had probably the best group we've ever had, the most coherent, wonderful group of people, and perfect weather. And we were out on this island on a state park by the Gulf of Mexico. And one of the things that everyone came to realize over the course of this training program that lasts about a week, we're going to do another one in Colorado up in the San Luis Valley where so many ET contact events have happened over the decades. They're near Creston, Colorado. We're going to be doing that in June of this year. But the people who are at this one that we just completed came to realize that if you look around the world, and I've done briefings for people at the UN Secretary General level, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee chairman, the people who are in State Department positions here, people who are in senior government positions in Britain, France, and other countries, and no one is doing anything about what I see as an unacknowledged crisis in diplomacy, and that is who's representing humanity to these civilizations. Because right now there's a clandestine cabal of sociopaths, and I think in some cases Dr. Strangelove-type psychopaths who have electromagnetic weapon systems that all they want to do is track these ET craft and target them and shoot them down and kill them, because that's their mindset. We don't know what it is. We don't want them here, so we're going to just shoot them down and kill them. So there has to be a citizens' diplomacy effort. And I remember back during the Cold War, there was a group that I had knowledge of and had a little involvement with called the Physicians for Social Responsibility, and another one that was for doctors that were doing basically civilian citizen diplomacy between Americans and the Soviet Union during the really dark days of the Cold War. Mm-hmm. And I said, we really need a global initiative. And that's why 22 years ago I started a program to train people to make contact with these civilizations and to show another side of the human face. Instead of the warfaring, destructive side, have people who would approach this in a peaceful way to make peaceful contact and make a bridge from now into the future where humans could become part of an interplanetary system, which is where we're headed. But that because, what I was astounded to find in doing briefings for, the Clinton administration from then till now, with senior people all over the world, is that no one is minding the store. Because this subject is so secret, that most of the conventional politicians and foreign office people and State Department people really don't know much about it at all, and there's certainly no organized attempt to make contact. So that's why we started this Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind initiative, or CE5 initiative, where we train people to use various protocols, including really advanced concepts in the science of consciousness, which we love talking about on this show because it's World Puja Network. It's all about people understand higher consciousness and the Vedas and the whole concept of enlightenment. But that these are the concepts that we have to bring to this interplanetary level of communication and contact. And the fact that most people don't know that the reason, for example, the CIA director that I briefed became very interested in, the head of Army intelligence back in the 90s, was that they found out that it was true that we had a group of people I was doing a weekend training for in Florida again, it was in the March of 1992, and we just had a training group out on a beach, and we were teaching people to remote view deep space, make contact, and invite these ETs in, and then pop, 4 extraterrestrial vehicles just materialize in the sky, and we have it on videotape, although it was old high videotape. It's not the greatest video in the world, but you can hear everyone talking about, oh my God, they're right here. And when this went up the chain of command, they realized, my God, there's a group of civilians that have figured out the Rosetta Stone of contact, and it works. And they're making this happen in all these places. And now we have literally thousands of people all over the world doing this, where it's created this momentum for peaceful contact to pull humanity away from this precipice of interplanetary war, which, of course, is what has been secretly the agenda, because, as Werner von Braun said, they want to hoax that there's a threat out there so that you can grow the military-industrial complex from $1 trillion a year to $5 trillion a year, eventually globally. And I think that what we as enlightened citizens have to say is that, no, we're not going to go along with that nonsense. We're going to do something else. So between that issue and the energy and environmental issue, it becomes a really key relevant matter, and I think these discussions that I've had with folks in Hollywood for really about 15 years, it was back in the 90s, I started meeting with people like Arnold Kopelson and a number of other directors and producers about this issue. But what we found was that no one was able to do a film on it that was based on a true story, that had this storyline in it, because whenever they started to, even when they thought they had, I've got a $60 million fund I have complete discretionary control over, or so I was told by one large movie maker, and then, they start moving down that path of development and they get a phone call. And then they're told that I get a phone call after that phone call that says, Dr. Greer, they're not going to let us make this film. And I've had that happen probably half a dozen times with some of the biggest names in Hollywood beginning in 1997. So that's 16 years ago. And my experience, Chris, with the Hollywood situation is that which is why we crowdfunded this, by the way, is that the money, it's so old, it sounds so cynical, but he who has the gold rules. And so the people who fund these projects, and remember there's like $2 billion that have gone into negative, xenophobic, alien invasion movies in the last couple of years, everything from Battle Los Angeles to, all this garbage. And they will fund those. They will not fund something that has a message of peace, of enlightenment, of contact, exposing the cabal for what it is, and exposing the secrecy for what it is, that is basically keeping everyone in macroeconomic slavery while we destroy the biosphere so a handful of people can run roughshod over the entire planet using fossil fuels for their wealth and also for centralized economic control. So I think these are the issues that no one has been able to work into a film until now with this documentary.
Yeah, well, that is the great thing about Sirius, and thank you to all the crowdfunders out there who support the project and continue to do so. In fact, crowdfunders all over the world are doing such great work in medical, entertainment, just so many different projects getting to see the light of day because of that. So what a great program. And yes, it's true, Hollywood is definitely a difficult place to manage and navigate through, and I'm proud to have 20 years in the business and have been working on the studio side, the independent side, and it is interesting. I started as a journalist, so I come to the table as a reporter, sort of a Lois Lane type, trying to get to the truth. And in uncovering the truth, you go on a journey, and I think it's different for everyone. I don't think everyone will have the same awakening. It's sort of like a coming out, so to speak. And it's funny how you'll find within your own personal network, friends, family, other people who are following the story, although they're doing it quietly, in their homes at night on the computer, following it very closely. I was surprised, very close friends of mine who I just never thought were even paying attention. When I mentioned working with you and on the film, they're just like, oh my gosh, I actually helped fund the project. Not only were they a contributor, but they'd been following the story for 5 years and felt like they never had anyone to talk to, and they were so happy that I was now talking to them about it and being able to share any intel and information that I had. So I think that's the great thing about the Sirius film. And as you were talking about the CE5, I was reminded of watching some of the sequences of the film that I've been fortunate enough to see, and the parts of the film that really strike you as a human, where like any great film where the hair on your arm just stands up because you're feeling so connected to the content. This film actually does that, and part of the film that makes that happen is the CE5 initiative, and how that really brings everyone together, and it becomes the unifying moment in the film that the audience, I think, will just want to turn around and hug each other, and just stand for joy and just sort of, announce this,
Well, and what's exciting is that we have people who are now coordinating as volunteers. Again, we have no paid staff or office, but we have this network globally now where it literally is thousands of people and hundreds of teams that get coordinated on this monthly basis, where they go out under the stars and do this meditative process and contact process, which has an enormous effect in what Rupert Sheldrake called the morphogenic field and sort of the collective consciousness. And that has been so gratifying, because I feel like, I could drop dead tomorrow, and this could all go on, because so many people have learned this. And in fact, we now, in the last couple of months, we've had for a year or two an iPhone app where you can learn all these protocols. And there's a link to that at the SiriusDisclosure.com site, SIRIUS, like the star system, SiriusDisclosure.com. But there's now an Android, and the Android app has widened it because of so many people have Android phones and not iPhones. And the people are going out with their iPhones and iPads and smartphones and Galaxies and everything, and they have the meditation, they have the tones. The app actually turns your device into a magnetic field detector, so if there's an approach of a craft that may not be in the visible spectrum, it'll start moving and going off, all kinds of things that are in this app. And actually, I hope this year we're going to have a version 2.0 where we're going to have even more material added to these apps. But the people, thousands of people are getting these apps from all over the world now. And we got a report from a truck driver, I think in Estonia, one of the Eastern European countries, and he had the app and was practicing this, and he had this amazing encounter on a highway where he'd taken a break, and this craft comes over and has contact. And then we've had, so all over the world, in almost every country, this is happening. It's very, very exciting to see what's going on.
Yeah, and being someone who learned directly from you, heard about CE5 for the first time, I think it'd be good to share with your listeners, just a few little tidbits of, how that came together, because I think there might be a myth that, you have to have a large group or you have to have Dr. Greer with you to be able to have this happen, and that's not the case. You can literally find that peaceful place within you, go outside, know that it's okay for you to see these things and allow yourself to see it. And I think people can really do a lot of, preparatory work just on their own. And whether you see something or don't see something, it's a bit like fishing. You must be patient,
Right.
and it's a bit of a Zen approach, So I think it's good for listeners to know that it's not a difficult thing to do. It's just a sort of something that you have to practice at. And for me, the first time that I had seen anything from a CE5, looking in the sky, I was actually within reach of you, and I started having some experiences. And
was it when we were at Sundance 2 years ago? Yeah.
I think you might remember. I pulled you outside, and I was like, "Is this it?" Because I just kind of ran into the parking lot and just kind of had a moment, and things started happening. So I was very excited, and that kind of opened me up to the possibility. So the next 5 days while we were all working together leading up to our Sundance event, we had the most amazing thing happen to all 15 of us as we were driving home through the snowy night to our large house in Heber where we were all staying and running our show from. And we had what was just one of the most amazing sightings that all of us were seeing, and everyone was sort of afraid to comment until somebody finally said, "Do you see that?" And then everyone just kind of erupted because we're in these minivans, driving on the freeway, and it followed us all the way home to the point where we had gotten stuck in the snow, and it was just hovering so close to us. And, it wasn't one of those tiny, maybe it's a satellite kind of situations, but something that felt as big as the full moon hovering up above us. And It was just life-changing forever, and I was so lucky to feel that connectivity, and I know that was there for all of us, so that we had our experience, so that we can feel more confident going forward in talking about CE5 and encouraging people to explore it.
Right, and I found this is true of everyone who gives themselves to it in a pure-hearted way. Something like that will happen that'll say yes. And I know that happened to actor Thomas Jane also, and we took him out in the desert last year and had this amazing experience happen, and he's had subsequent ones as well. And I think that what I've discovered is that these ETs are very aware of the relatively small number of people out of the 7 billion people on the planet who are on the cutting edge of trying to make something amazing happen for humanity that moves us to the next level of our civilization, not just technologically, but also in terms of conscious evolution and contact and the development of our civilization. And if someone begins to move in that direction, it's sort of amazing how they're there, and in the most enigmatic but also, in a sense, effortless ways. It'll just happen like a butterfly that lands on your shoulder. You almost can't make it happen. You have to just intend and hope it does, and then it does.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for me, coming out of that very remarkable situation, I felt a bit spoiled, because then every time I looked into the sky, I'm like, where are you? Where's the big one? Can you send the big one out? But,
they're there, don't worry.
I know. So, again, you have to be patient. If you have an encounter one day, you may not another day, and you go back out. And that was what I experienced. I was fortunate to have a very close friend of mine be interested in going on a very personal two-person CE5 mission, all on our own into the southern deserts of Utah, really literally in the middle of nowhere. And within 2 minutes of literally parking the car and going outside to take a breath and just take in the beauty of the sky, we had a UFO give us this awesome zigzag, really crisp, nice Z's back and forth, and did a nice flyby and just disappeared. And then we had a few others during the 3 days that we were there.
Wow. Where was this? This was
that was Caneville, Utah, which just outside of Lake Powell, about an hour.
Right.
And
wow.
It's a great viewing spot. I was amazed at how much regular air traffic there was, though, in that area, because I thought,
there is.
I really thought, hey, we're going into the middle of nowhere. There must be great, stars and ability to see the sky, and there was, but there was, you could just count the planes going by every so often. Kind of annoying.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's everywhere we go is like that, and you begin to realize how much air traffic there is, and of course, we added to that whenever we're doing one of these expeditions, we invariably also have military reconnaissance planes that come over. I know last time we were in England, we're going back to the crop circles and into England this summer in late July. And for those of you who want to join us, it's a fantastic week because we spend all day going around all the different crop circles and sacred spots. And then at night we have this site that's up on a high hill with these giant ancient trees on one side, and it's surrounded by 1,800 acres of Royal Trust farmland that we've been given permission to use. And so we're on this 1,800-acre private estate, which is huge in England.
Wow.
And 1,800 acres is a lot of land in America, but never mind in England. And but we were having this amazing contact going on, and then immediately right over us came a helicopter, a series of helicopters that were so low that I could have hit the underside of it with a rock, but no lights on it, no markings, no lights, no navigation lights, completely illegal. And everyone on the group was going, "Oh my God, is this ever happened before?" I said, "Yeah, every week," and you just kind of take that, it's going to happen. But what's cool is that there's, even though there's that attempt by the military to suppress what we're doing, the ETs are so amazing in their ability to do things that are enigmatic, that move around the sort of buffoonery of these clumsy military attempts to suppress it. And, I know at a certain point that all is going to change, because at a certain point we're going to have enough evolution in our society that even the military will be assisting us, because my experience has been that there are these kind of black projects within the military, but that most of the military people that I have met with, and certainly Commander Miller has found this to be the case, are victims of the secrecy. I know that when we did the briefing for the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, a 3-star general, he was very frustrated because he was very interested in the subject, had not been involved in any of these unacknowledged special access projects, as they're called, or black projects that deal with the UFO issue. But when he tried to find out about it, he was basically brushed off and was given a little ET doll as a gag gift by someone. And this is in spite of the fact that there are people within the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is kind of like the CIA for the Pentagon. It's almost as big as the CIA, but it's solely within the Pentagon for their intelligence gathering. And this was the guy who's in charge of it. It's like the CIA director for the Pentagon. And this guy was basically being strong-armed out. And so there are a lot of military people I meet with frequently who aren't part of any grand conspiracy. People think this is a much bigger conspiracy than it is. It's really a relatively small, compartmented, but very powerful group that's running this. And most of the military people are actually quite friendly to what we're wanting to do in terms of disclosure, bringing out the technologies, getting out of the Middle East oil conundrum, because they know their brothers in arms are dying over there for no good reason. They're very interested in assisting, but they don't know what to do. And it's I know that we had this experience with the man who was in charge of what's called J2, the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that we did a briefing for, that he at the end of the briefing, I was saying, we really need your help. He says, well, what can I do? He says, I've located, because I'd given him a document that had some of the project code numbers and code names on it, and he recognized one of them. And when he got hold of them, they basically told him, sir, we're not going to tell you about what we're doing. And he says, look, I'm the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and it was an admiral. And they said, yes, sir, we know who you are, but we're not going to discuss this with you. And they hung up on him. And the distressing thing about that was that it really scared him, and he was very angry. By the time I got to this briefing, he had that experience, because we had sent the briefing document that I had provided to the president in advance of this meeting. And the admiral, when I asked him, to help, he says, what can I do? He says, the best thing I have that I know about is a B-2 stealth bomber, and this cabal of folks you're talking about have anti-gravity devices that can do circles around it, apparently. I said, yes, they can. And he says, well, I don't even know what I can do, because I can't do anything without orders from my civilian leadership. And you've already said that the president is scared to move on this, and the Secretary of Defense is scared to move on it. And so what am I going to do? So it's this sort of, logjam. And so that's when I concluded, okay, we have to do disclosure, we the people. We have to make contact. It won't be Hillary Clinton at the State Department or John Kerry. If the people will lead, the leaders will follow, just because of the force of the ideas going out through thousands and then millions of people. And that's really what we hope this film will accomplish, is to create that in a really grassroots way. And this is, by the way, this is one of the things where I think Chris has a really good perspective on a kind of guerrilla tactics for independent film distribution, because while we're going to try to get a big distributor, to pick this up so it shows at theaters all over the world. The likelihood of that is less than if we just release it on video on demand and also do a sort of an independent release through independent theaters that all of you listening today are basically our representatives locally. So that if you live in a city where there's an independent theater that has independent films, to contact them and to start talking about having a few nights, or even if it's one night where there's a special screening for this film, that's how this could create an enormous sort of momentum around the world, because this is one of the largest crowd-funded films, and it may be the largest documentary crowd-funded films in history, and there are almost 4,000 people who've contributed to it, which means that all 4,000 people could potentially become representatives in their towns to help us network to all these independent theaters, which have become a very big part of the movie industry worldwide, where it's not at a big, chain distributor system where you would see a Tom Cruise film, but where, people have all these other types of films that come out. And, we could possibly organize something where it could come out on 100 or 200 or 300 and then eventually 500 cities that way.
Yeah, well, it's a great thing to talk about, actually, and I'd love to let some of the listeners know what we're working on and how we intend to roll the film out using a three-tiered strategy that is both big studio theatrical distribution models married with, VOD and delivering the film online to every possible distribution point. But it's really the grassroots third component that is going to be the most important, and it's the same reason why Facebook is doing so well right now. It's that, sharing with your friends and family. And what I want people to know is that even with the large cinemaplexes in your area, whether it's your local AMC theater or, big chain, those are run by people. And inside those theaters are managers, and those managers have to fill those seats. And sometimes there's an empty theater. If it's a 14-plex, go look at the schedule. They may have 3 empty theaters on that day that are doing nothing. And you can cut a deal with the theater manager to say, hey, I'd like to host this film. How much will it cost? And then our group is intending to build an infrastructure with marketing dollars and other sponsorship-driven kind of campaigns where we can help people on the ground in those areas get access to those theaters. And then it's the job, once you secure the theater, it's simply how do we fill 300 seats? Well, postcards go out, posters, just like a carnival coming to town. We get the word out. People get on the radio or just tell their network. I'm reminded of movies like Passion of the Christ that Mel Gibson had put out. And, my family, actually, I was younger at the time, but my mom was very taken by the film and wanted to help everyone see it. And not all theaters were planning to show it. So there was sort of a grassroots movement within our local church where I remember things coming literally into us at church. We're hearing about this film and how we should call to action, get people together, and go watch it together. And so my mother, may she rest in peace, actually organized an entire screening, raised all the money, brought everyone together, and it was a free screening. So it's not that hard to do, and we're here to help. So as we move forward in the release of the film, our websites will definitely become live with links and information on how to reach us to establish those programs in your local area. So if you are interested, please definitely reach out and let us know, and we'll be having media and packages and things that we can send out to help support the film.
Yeah, in the next 2 months, this is going to be the big push, is to get the premiere organized, get the film finished, and to also be able to begin to look at what our options are. And one thing that we've looked at is that if enough people do this, where there's a large number of people that network this into their own networks, and some of the people who are in my network have 20, 40, 50,000 people on their email list, that what we could do is do this as very grassroots sort of viral networking, and that will get the attention of the big guys even if they don't want to do it initially, and often that is what happens. And so what we want to do with this is make this something where it's a real public education, awareness-building event. And I think that everyone listening and involved with this, who's on the show right now listening, are potential representatives, distributors, networkers for us, because that's really how we've put this together. I mean, there are no corporate people who put 1 red cent into this. And actually, the Disclosure Project, which at the time was the most watched event in the history of the Internet, not just the National Press Club, the entire history of the Internet, was all done by volunteers and networking. And of course it broke into the mainstream media and ended up on, Pravda and Chinese News Agency and CNN and Headline News and all that. But the point is that it was really based in large numbers of people jumping on and getting involved. And so this will be sort of that next level of that with this full-length feature film, and that's our goal. And ultimately, our goal is that the proceeds of this will go into building a new energy research lab, because there's so many things going on. I'll give you an example. I can't be too specific about what this is, but in the last couple of weeks, a man has approached me whose a family had been involved in the 40s building the early anti-gravity propulsion drive systems, and had actually built one. But subsequently it got subsumed into secret programs. But this man's family still has the full blueprints, models, plans, details of this that they want to hand off to us so we can build this system back up. Obviously, we want to do that, but to do so is a very difficult thing. You're going to have a laboratory. You're going to have it well equipped with the right equipment, physicists, materials management people, and specialists, electromagnetic specialists, mechanical engineers, on and on and on. It can be done. But these, we're sitting on, and this is one example. Another example is I have a disc, a CD, that has several thousand patents and designs that have been illegally seized, that was given to me by a man who was being recruited by the CIA to work for them because of his skill in these secret energy and propulsion systems. And they were sort of letting him copy and look at a lot of information, which he did, and he kept them, and he has since digitized it and has given it to us. So now, of course, that's in a 2-dimensional format. To make a 3-dimensional device, you've got to actually have people who can do that R&D and do it. But we have so much intelligence and data and information, and so what we really want to do with this film is to bring the awareness of not only peaceful contact, but the fact that these technologies are real and have been suppressed for over 100 years. If you deal with just the straight-up energy ones, the propulsion ones have been around for 70 years or more. In fact, T. Townsend Brown first started doing high-voltage electromagnetic lifters that would cause levitation effect on items in 1928, 29. I mean, that's 80-some years ago. So when you look at this, we have 85 years where there's been all this, my autobiography is called Hidden Truth and Forbidden Knowledge. It's all these hidden truths and forbidden knowledge that has kept our whole society, in a sense, retarded, held back, delayed in where we could be. And in the meanwhile, because of that aberration in our evolution, we're now destroying both polar ice caps. Antarctica ice shelves are melting off. The oceans are dying. We have 7 billion people trying to live like we do with coal-fired power plants. 82% of electricity out of India and China is dirty coal now, and it's going up, not down. And so to solve this problem, you're not going to do it with a windmill here and there. You're going to need this whole new physics, which is behind the secrecy of the entire UFO subject. And so even in this last week or two, I've had a person approach me whose family was intimately involved with this, a genius person. It's all got suppressed, but they had kept the plans. So what are we going to do with that? Well, I can't. I mean, I'm just a country doctor here in Virginia, and I don't pretend to be a electromagnetic engineer or a fabricator. In fact, I can't even hook up a DVD player. My wife has to do that. So, the truth of the matter is I've got to put a team together of really top-drawer researchers, physicists, and engineers to do this, but you can't do that with a few $1,000s. You really need, $6 to $10 million for a 1.5 to 2 year program to do that properly. And if we had it, we could do it. What I'm hoping this film will do, through everyone who gets the importance of this issue, is that it'll go viral. We can raise those funds. We already have an entity set up to manage and bring this forward. And bring the technologies forward. And it's not like we'll be starting from scratch, my friends. If you read between the lines of what I've just shared with you, we're sitting on a gold mine of information, data, documents, designs. But to get those put into three-dimensional operational systems, you're not going to do that out of your garage part-time. This is a serious R&D effort. And I know that, being chairman of emergency medicine, I mean, our emergency department had like a $24 million budget just for that one town, for that one department, not the whole hospital, that one department. So to do anything properly with professional support, on something that's a heavy physics-oriented research project, you've got to get serious about it. And that's, serious is no pun intended, but that's actually, that's why we named this new website Sirius Disclosure, because it's sort of a double entendre. It's spelled like the star system Sirius, Sirius, but it has the meaning that this is serious disclosure going on, not, what politician had a sex scandal yesterday, which is considered an investigative report, in the mainstream media now. But SiriousDisclosure.com is dealing with the really serious issues, and that's why we hope this film, if everyone gets on board and becomes the sort of adjunct distributors and representatives. Yeah, and I hope I think that's a model that could really be very, very successful. I know here where we live, where the University of Virginia is, there's a great independent theater that hosts a lot of independent films that could be engaged, and there could be several screenings, and it would be filled. Because, even in a little town like this, when I just give a talk for a couple hours, we've had 600-700 people come. So there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to do this in every college town in America, every city in America, and through, Facebook and Twitter and viral marketing and networking, we should be able to make this a huge success.
Sure, yeah.
And I really think that's some of the concepts that, that Chris and I have been talking about.
Yeah, and it's not so taboo anymore. I mean, we live in the day of Ancient Aliens as a top-rated show on Nat Geo,
Right.
And there's lots of information being shared on Facebook. In fact, just in the 6 years that I've been following the story, my Facebook timeline went from having nothing about UFOs or ET subjects to now so many of my friends and colleagues sharing information freely about that without fear of judgment or ridicule. Most of it tied to the energy technologies, and that again is a platform that I think everyone can get behind, even just in the name of exploring the truth. Whether they think there's something there or not, what does it hurt to jump on the bandwagon and ask for this information to be released so that we can know one way or the other, and we all know what the answers are going to be.
Yeah, and see, one of the things I think to remind people, what couldn't have been done 5 to 10 years ago can be done now because of all the different internet sites, the ability to host things, have video on demand that goes viral. All of these are things that just didn't, the infrastructure wasn't there, and the platforms weren't there. Now they are. And so, it'd be great if a big mainstream distributor picks it up and really pushes it out. But if not, my attitude is, so what? We can do it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, it's just people going to a place to watch a film, whether that happens in a major cinema box office, in your living room, at a convention center, or wherever. It's just the process of watching this film and understanding its message and sharing it with your friends.
Yeah, and the film is going to have a link to the fund that's been created to develop this new energy research center. And it's also what we're going to do after this film comes out is that we're going to create a series of short films that are going to go into more depth. Obviously, everyone knows that the film is only 2 hours. So, and we're sitting on right here in my house office archive subterranean storage vault probably, I don't know, a couple of hundred hours of amazing product that the world has never seen, because how? So what we want to do is, after this, is to begin to create a steady flow of things that drill down more deeply into the science of consciousness that's on the video, that goes into deeper aspects of transdimensional technologies and sciences and physics, that goes into deeper discussions of the CE5 contact experiences, because we have hundreds and hundreds of videos and images that aren't going to make it into this film, that because you can't do everything in 2 hours, obviously.
Your life is a trilogy, Dr. Greer.
So what we want to do is, but the public really is hungry for this information in a way that we've never had the means to get it out.
Yes.
And what we want to do over the next year is to have the film released, and then in the aftermath of the film have a steady sort of supply of more information and more details. For example, we've been wanting for a while now, and we've just identified someone who we're going to engage to do this, to get the entire Disclosure Project archive of what I call my director's cut of all the top secret witnesses, because most people don't realize that the only thing that's been available to the public has been either a 2-hour, 4-hour video that was done as an amateur video, frankly, in the aftermath of the National Press Club event over a decade ago. But I have 110 hours on videotape already, and I've cut that into a 35-hour prime director's cut. But we haven't ever been able to get it out, so we're going to start releasing more and more of that. We started last year, and then we started working on this film, and with everyone being a volunteer, it kind of fell aside. But that's what we want to. We're going to engage someone full time to just do nothing but bring out all this amazing information. Most people have never seen. There's only a handful of people who've seen the briefing that I put together for President Obama, which was, carried to him by a close associate and a supporter of what we're doing, but who is very close to the president. But that needs to be seen by the whole world. But where? So that there's so much material like that it's an embarrassment of riches. We have the world's largest collection of bona fide amazing stuff, and yet our frustration has been, how do you get it out there? Because you have to have people who know how to do it and can produce it and get it out. But now with YouTube and all the other channels and sites that are out there, if we had someone who was doing nothing but that full time, it would be just this amazing amount of information. And that's what we also want to start doing after the film comes out this spring.
Yeah, well, I think when the film does come out, the phone is definitely going to ring for people looking for what's next from Dr. Greer and the team, and I'm sure that there will be additional follow-up documentaries that will come from the subject matter, and there is a lot of information. I mean, the film, the way I see it right now, basically catches people up. And when I look at it from my own perspective, my 6-year journey boiled down into 2 years. Everything I've seen or learned or came to understand that took me a lot of hours of research and talking with folks and going out on CE5 missions and things, people are going to get caught up really quickly. Once they digest that core information, they'll be primed and ready for all of the other things that you have in your library. So I think we're very excited to see all of that. I, working closely with you, have not even seen all of it myself. So,
no, you've only seen 1%. Maybe.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what else is in there.
Yeah. And, we have the other thing we're getting ready to do is that, we have these 4 books that are out, but they're all in paper, and we're getting ready to convert all those to ebooks so that people can get those just like they can get the training information in an app. So this is all work that we're trying to do. Of course, my wife and I and a couple of people working on it are a bit overwhelmed, but the thing that people can do is to help us by networking this to all their friends and family, and also starting their own contact group in their area and learning how to do this, because it creates this shift in consciousness and the morphogenic field effect. It's like the 100th monkey effect. It really has been measured scientifically that when more people start doing something, it opens the doors and paves the way. But I think the same is true for disclosure. It's the same is true for the technologies. It's all about a shift in mass consciousness that builds a new civilization, sort of in that moves beyond, trying to deal. And a lot of people want to get caught up in conspiracy theories and railing against this cabal of misanthropic psychopaths who've run the planet into the ground. Well, my view of it is that you have to be aware of those characters because, I get a death threat every week. But the reality is you don't focus on that. You focus on the creation of an entirely new civilization based on a new consciousness. And as Albert Einstein said, no problem's ever been solved from the level of consciousness that created it. So we have to create a new level of consciousness and understanding and then go from there with all these tools and information and technologies.
Yeah, our thoughts so powerful, energy literally in every thought, and by projecting that light forward, I think we all together can create that awareness and that reality. Much like the way that the Wicked Witch melted away and her minions suddenly became like, oh, thank God you got rid of the witch. I think project that light, and even the military and others will eventually
only through the garbage that, no offense to you, Chris, of course, that Hollywood puts out on the subject, which is 99% xenophobic, nasty, scary stuff. And when I started talking to people and started talking about the extent to which Disclosure Project has, over 500 top secret military witnesses and whistleblowers, and that we've been doing briefings for, the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency and the CIA director, members of Congress for almost 20 years, people were a little bit astonished. I mean, I think for most people that the subject is so much pigeonholed into the realm of the fantastic and the fantasy and the science fiction genre that they didn't really understand that underneath all of that, or behind sort of it hiding, is a true story. And the true story is actually much more fascinating than any of the science fiction that's been created. And it was interesting sort of having that conversation with people in Hollywood because, it's the land of fantasy. And when you start talking about the reality of the subject and then you sort of bridge over to, why it's been held secret. I know we were having a conference call yesterday with our film team that Hello and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. I'm Dr. Greer and I'm the founder of the Disclosure Project and the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And also we are doing a film known as Sirius. You can find out more about that at SiriusDisclosure.com. That's SIRIUS Disclosure.com. And I'd like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network for hosting us here every 2 weeks to give you an update on our work and the exciting projects that we're involved with, dealing with new energy, anti-gravity systems, ET contact, and now, of course, this full-length feature documentary film that is set for release this spring. So I'm really excited about our guest today. It's Chris Crescitelli. He is a wonderful man who I met 2 years ago at Sundance Film Festival, and he is someone who's done a lot of work in Hollywood with films and hosting special events and putting together the well-known 3D Film Festival that's in Los Angeles. And in fact, it's Chris who introduced me to actor Thomas Jane, who is now doing the voiceover for our film Sirius. So Chris has done a great job networking for us and helping us with this project, and is sort of one of the co-producers for the film Sirius, and is also going to help pull together the premiere that we're going to be holding in Los Angeles, the main big premiere for Hollywood. And so I'm excited about having him on the call today and on the show, and to kind of introduce him to the audience, and so that he can talk about how he got involved with all of this. So welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, so why don't you tell folks a little bit about how you got interested in the whole subject, having been doing work in Hollywood for a couple of decades, and how we sort of met a couple of years ago.
Sure. Well, like most creative people in Hollywood, when you find a project that interests you or a subject matter, you tend to do a little bit of research. And as it turns out, I was working on a screenplay that was intended to be a movie about sort of a peaceful alien encounter. And in my research, I was fortunate enough to stumble upon the Disclosure Project and all the work that you've been doing, Dr. Greer. Some of the eye-opening instances probably that hit on the Richter scale for me some of the work and discussions that you had with Paul Hellyer. I believe he's a big conduit to reach people like myself in Hollywood and other places. So having the impetus to set up a program in Sundance was a really great idea, and thanks to you, we pulled off the first sort of mainstream corporate marketed UFO event. And I was wondering how you felt about that program, having a different audience than the typical convention and UFO enthusiasts. There you were talking to a lot of filmmakers and journalists and people who were there for the normal corporate mainstream marketing, and they got a dose of this very explosive, very interesting information.
Yeah, well, it was fun. I mean, both this past year and 2 years ago, because so many of the people who are in Hollywood, and I met a number of well-known actors and producers and whatnot, and they know the subject. It's been involved with a marketing group there in Hollywood that has done a lot of the big films and worked on An Inconvenient Truth and The Hobbit and Django Unchained and all these other films, and one of the things that the person couldn't understand apparently was the connection between the ET subject and this whole environmental and energy issue. And it was kind of comical because on the call yesterday, and I know, Chris, you couldn't be on it, but I said, look, it's really simple. All you have to do is ask the question, here's a photograph of the craft. Here is a body we're working on that is quite obviously of extraterrestrial origin, but we're still investigating it. And here's all these whistleblowers who have been involved with these projects up to and including retrieving downed ET vehicles that we've shot down and autopsying bodies and studying the propulsion and energy systems behind it. With all that evidence that we have and the thousands of pages of top-secret documents and the hundreds and hundreds of hours of top-secret testimony that we have on videotape, someone needs to ask the question, how are they getting from there to here? And when you ask that question, that's